Story 1. Divorce. Walked away with about $100,000 in assets. Then she took another few million in emotional pain compensation. I am all good now, though, and she gained weight. Story 2. Spent around $3,000 for driving lessons to get a commercial truck license. Failed the road exam twice and then gave up. Considered trying again, but the commercial truck licensing process in my country changed significantly. Instead of continuing from where I left off and spending several hundred to a few $1,000s, I would have to start from scratch and spend close to $15,000, which is 5 times the original amount I spent. I am not spending $15,000 to be a trucker, so I have decided to write off the initial $3,000 as a loss. Story 3. I bought a truck for $10,000 in cash. It was stolen a couple of days later. Miscommunication between my wife and me resulted in no insurance on it. $10,000 down the drain. Story 4. Several $100,000 from a startup investment of money and time were lost when the founder ended up being a crook. The technology was good and legitimate. He just found it easier to fleece people and employees than to do the work of selling the goods. Doing the latter would have made significantly more money, but the former was much easier for him. Story 5. I just spent $12,000 to keep my 5-year-old dog alive. We are both on a chicken and rice diet for a bit until I recover, but I would not change a thing. He saved my life, so it was only right that I saved his. Story 6. Lost over $50,000 in a freak flood without any insurance. 2 cars, furnace, water heaters, washer, dryer, and all the contents of my basement were damaged. It really was not that bad because many of those things were at the end of their life, but replacing everything at once was hard. Story 7. My divorce cost me approximately $80,000 at the time, which was most of what I had. To be fair, it is usually much more expensive to remove cancer from your life, so it was quite the bargain from that perspective. Story 8. I was diagnosed with cancer and underwent a year of treatment. 2 weeks after finishing, my employer of 6 years placed me on probation for using a smiley face in Slack that seemed sarcastic. 2 months later, I was let go, which traumatized me more than the cancer itself. The combination of exhaustion from 45 days of radiation and intense mental anguish left me unable to work for nearly 2 years. I am still struggling with a significant amount of debt. I cannot declare bankruptcy because I would lose my home. I am now working hard to recover, and it will feel like a great victory when I am financially stable again. It has been a very difficult few years. Story 9. Having to pay $9,000 to meet my deductible before having necessary surgery, and that is with insurance. Thank you, United States healthcare system. Story 10. I had money from a lawsuit, and my ex-husband got me involved in a gas station business in which our partner stole most of that money. I was young and naive, and I was dealing with con artists. The partner eventually went to prison for other financial crimes. I think about that money and how much I would have today if I had left it invested. This was 27 years ago. Story 11. I won $250,000 at the roulette table in Atlantic City, but lost it all by the next morning. I left with a jet ski and trailer that I won. I sold it for $10,000. Story 12. I've spent 23 years building a career in Hollywood. Now, production companies have offshored almost all production of nearly every film and series. In the past, people like me would be flown to wherever we'd shoot, but no more. The reason they offshored is that places like Ireland, the United Kingdom, the Czech Republic, Hungary, South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia are offering 40% tax incentives for shooting there and hiring all crew locally, except for a select few. Also, the labor rates are lower. Some of these countries have basically no regulations, and some will provide military support for free. On top of this, my pension, which I need another 10 or so years to complete, is tied to my union local. If I try to move somewhere else with a different union local, I have to abandon this pension and start over. I've spent around $250,000 on equipment, bought a house, built a portfolio, and even won an Oscar and British Academy of Film and Television Arts Award. I haven't had more than a week's work in the last 14 months total. My credit cards are maxed, my savings are almost gone, and I'm rapidly approaching the stage where I have to sell everything and figure my life out. I was working on crime scene investigation and by all accounts should have stayed for a decade, but Columbia Broadcasting System is falling apart and they canceled us. I'm not mad, really. I always knew as a freelancer that stuff like this is possible. I just never thought it would get this bad this soon. Story 13. Bought a used 2021 Model S Plaid right before Elon Musk dropped the price of the new one by $20,000. Ended up losing over $40,000 to $50,000 when we sold it 6 months later. It was an absolute disaster. Story 14. Buying a condominium in 2005. They implemented a special assessment in 2007, and I had 30 days to come up with $25,000. Sold it at a loss in 2008. Story 15. My spouse and I had to drain our retirement accounts and all our savings to pay for our daughter's cancer treatment. Story 16. Bought a car for $4,000 cash. It had many problems, so I spent at least $2,500 to fix it over the course of 1 year. I then traded it into a dealership for $999 in trade-in value. Story 17. Buying a house when the market was high in 2002 and losing a lot of money to dishonest contractors, burst pipes, a failed septic system, and the housing crash. Still, I am lucky to have a roof over my head, which was just replaced this year. Story 18. Coronavirus disease. I lost my job, spent every dollar of our savings to survive, and when that was finished, we had to withdraw our pensions. Now, at 36 years old, with a wife and 10-year-old daughter, we are living in a one-bedroom flat in the financial position of someone who has just left school. I think about suicide almost daily. Story 19. I am in the United Kingdom, and I do not believe the divorce will cost either of us much. We are both low earners and have no assets, apart from the house she owns that I do not want. I had about £4,000 in savings when I met her in 2019, but that was spent because of her. Since last year, I received another £10,000 thanks to student maintenance loans, which I intended to save. She spent all of that too on vacation trips that we are now not even going on because we separated in February. While I have free will, I am the type of person who just compromises to make his partner happy. Because of that, I have nothing in savings now. If I had not met her or had not been a doormat, I could have saved up to £15,000 or more by now. But such is life. Story 20. I was quickly persuaded to have a sump pump and French drain installed in my basement when I only needed gutters installed. Companies can be very predatory toward first-time homebuyers. Story 21. Oh Lord, I've never really told anyone this before. I became crippled and lost around $5,000. To me, that was a lot. It was everything I had saved my entire life. I sadly grew up poor and lived by myself. Anyway, I got into a relationship and she ended up slowly taking all my money within a month. I never really noticed until she broke up with me and went back to her ex in another country. Now, a year later, I had an accident, and a year after that, another one. I can't use my leg properly. It's been a wild ride being completely broke. That might not sound like a lot, but considering what I'm going through at the moment, I would just have my head slightly above water. Story 22. My health is improving. Besides that, the very successful startup I had was experiencing rapid growth, but due to previous issues, it could not keep up with demand. I have been losing about $20,000 a month and running out of resources. I have this year left to fix it, or I will lose it all, but I am still recovering until probably December. Wish me luck. Story 23. Divorce. That said, it was a financial loss, but personally the best decision I ever made. The only problem was that I hadn't done it much earlier. The marriage was actually really short. I didn't get proper advice until well into things, and I had agreed because she was very mentally ill. She was also a terrible person. The line between mentally ill and abusive can be fine when the abuse is directed at you. I saw a lawyer right before mediation and was told, "You can get this fast or get this fair. You are probably owed everything you brought to the relationship, and she likely will receive nothing if you fight and go before a judge. You literally have the pay receipts. But you need to consider all the therapy and lawyer costs you will incur if you want that." During mediation, she made up something really upsetting, while also bringing up a separate lie that I had heard she was telling people. I had predicted this and had proof saved on my phone, but didn't get a chance to present it. She wanted 60 to 40. I asked how much that was worth and did a mental calculation. About a year's worth of what I had put into my retirement savings. About 6 months at that point. I agreed. It was also useful because when I later checked my information and confirmed she was lying, I absolutely knew in my heart I had made the right choice. She was a sociopath. In the end, it all worked out for me. The next person she entered a long-term relationship with ended up committing a gold heist to support her financial demands. So really, I got off easy. Story 24. I have been scammed for $53,000. The bank did a chargeback without notice. I also did not have an overdraft facility. Story 25. In 2007, my parents used my college fund, which I funded from a lawsuit while I was in college, to pay my father's medical debt. This effectively halted my ability to continue my education at the school I was attending. In 2008, I experienced identity theft just in time for the economic crash. This, combined with a job loss and 18 months of unemployment, delayed my ability to find a decent job to start paying on my unfinished college education. They do not defer payments for 10 years when you leave with a partial scholarship and loan. I made a poor choice in selecting an abusive partner with whom I invested $50,000. A little over 2 years ago, I left everything I could not pack into a small moving truck behind, including a well-paying job that refused to allow me to work remotely for a while. All of these were losses and lessons. I am strangely happier now as a struggling paycheck-to-paycheck, tightly budgeted, barely full-time employee with debt. At least I have managed to get my credit score back above 800. I have managed chaos very well. Story 26. I had about $3.5 to $4 million worth of Dogecoin stolen. When the app one used to store, it just disappeared. When I started, it was worth almost nothing, so I used a random free app for it. Having no value was the whole point. I spent very little money to get it. So maybe I only lost a few $100s, maybe more. It depends on how you look at it. Story 27. My first marriage. She spent more of my money than I will ever publicly admit. The best thing that ever happened to me, both emotionally and financially, was when she walked out on me and our 2 infants. Story 28. My best friend and I worked in insurance for a month and split what we made. He ended up getting paid more and never gave me the difference of about $4,000. A few years later, we started a business together. A year later, he started writing checks to drug dealers from our joint account. I lost another $3,000. He promised to pay me back, then overdosed and died. The good news is the business is still doing extremely well and is very successful. Story 29. 1. Buying a house. 2. Paying my wife's student loan debts. 3. 2019 Hyundai Tucson. Luckily, I still have the house, my wife, and received something for the trade-in of the car. Story 30. Pets. Love them, but between special food and veterinary bills, they cost us between $8,000 and $10,000 a year. They live a long time. We have already decided that when we retire, we will only foster. Story 31. I bought a property with my parents that I was going to turn into a farm. I was credit card debt and loan-free prior to this, but I have been raising livestock for over a decade. Having a legitimate hobby farm just selling eggs and animals was something I really enjoyed doing. I spent a lot of money on materials, fencing, shelters, mower, and so on. It was over $20,000. I was working 3 jobs at the time as well, and my parents said they would live there and take care of the animals while I was at work. I was also paying all the bills. Well, that lasted only 6 months. They did not want any part of it. There were constant arguments that I was not there enough, even though they were both retired and I was working a lot. They had nothing else to do but be home, so I cut contact with them. Luckily, I never sold my own home, but I was in the hole for $20,000, lost all of my animals, some of which I had for over a decade. I have since started over and paid all that debt off. I would never go into a business or property with any other person. I thought it would be okay with my parents, but it was not. However, I am happy to no longer have to deal with them. Overall, it was an improvement. Aside from the money, I still think back on the animals that I gave up. Story 32. About $30,000 spent on my education. You would think a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics degree would pay off, but in reality, I regret listening to everyone else instead of myself. It has helped me somewhat, but I do not work directly in my field. Such a waste. Story 33. Does a loss in opportunity cost count? I should have passively invested what little I could while in graduate school. Now I am 6 years behind in investing. I feel this loss is overlooked. Story 34. A $150 bet on red at the roulette table about 30 years ago. I have never gambled since. People usually come to me for financial advice because I am very frugal. Story 35. I started a business with my former partner, who managed to deceive me out of it after 6 years of building it into a sizable marketing firm. Altogether, it amounted to about $500,000 in losses. Story 36. Bought cameras, lenses, and other studio equipment to make YouTube videos and short movies. Never launched a channel because I am very introverted. The total loss is around $7,000. However, I still have the equipment collecting dust on the shelf. Story 37. Trading cryptocurrency during its heyday, I focused on Ethereum. The funny thing is, at the time, trading it was not actually a bad bet. If I had timed it right, I could have made some decent money. However, I am not good at trading and lost about $1,000 two separate times. I could afford the loss. It was always a gamble, but it hurts knowing it was just me being bad. Story 38. My first love, I incurred a lot of debt to buy her everything she asked for, including her dream car. God only knows how I managed to take on all that debt. 10 years later, I am still paying it off while she has happily moved on with her life. Story 39. Bought a pre-owned Pontiac Trans Am back in the day for $17,500 from a dealership. The car had a bent rear axle. Went back to the dealership, and someone vandalized the car while it was in their possession. Litigation took 2 years. Finally got the car back. Drove it for a few months, then got into an accident. Traded it in for a Chevrolet Blazer a few months later for $5,250. Story 40. Lost 250 pounds on roulette and felt sick. Investments went down 25,000 pounds but felt less upset as it was out of my control since I could not access them at the time. They have recovered some of that since. Story 41. Refinanced from a conventional mortgage to a negative amortization loan right before the housing market collapsed. Story 42. Subscriptions. I had a 2-year gym subscription but only used it for 3 months. Netflix, HBO, Amazon Prime Video, and Disney Plus really take your money, and it is not worth it. Story 43. I had poor timing selling my car when I needed to leave the country, so I lost 5,000 euros of its value by selling it to a dealer. This money was meant to be used to get an old car in the new country, so I ended up with no money for a car. Story 44. I bought a car. Well, I traded my car and a set of wheels and tires for it. 3 weeks later, it was stolen. I still have to pay back the loan since it was a personal loan instead of an auto loan. The insurance paid nothing for the car after they took 6 months investigating me for fraud. Story 45. I would say my biggest financial loss is selling a car to a friend who owed me $500. For $500. I bought the car for $5,000 from my mom. I regret it to this day. Story 46. When I was around 19 to 22, I lived in my hometown of Savannah, Georgia. I wanted to visit my friends in North Carolina and needed some spending money. My great-aunt had left me a gorgeous diamond engagement ring that was almost a carat. It was a Blue Ridge diamond set in white gold. I knew how pawn shops worked, which is why I told the old man at the counter I only wanted to borrow $100 so I could make sure I would get it back. Well, I am sure you can see where this is going. I kind of forgot and showed up on the 91st day of a 90-day pawn. The man informed me it had already been sold, I am sure to an employee or the owner. I cried all the way home and for the next 2 weeks. The value today would probably be $10,000 to $15,000. Story 47. Bought 2 Journey Together booster boxes for 525 Canadian dollars each and saw the same thing on the marketplace for just 300. I was upset. Though the pulls were not extraordinary, it was an unforgettable experience I would not trade for the world. On video, I have myself pulling the Y-Lord and my brother pulling Articuno at the exact same time, which is amazing because they were both our personal chases and we were going pack for pack. That would not have happened unless I overpaid, so it just feels somehow right even though it also feels wrong. Story 48. I was scammed in the Dominican Republic for about $200 inside the airport. Do not visit the Dominican Republic. It is not very nice, and the people are unfriendly. Story 49. Made $13,000 trading stock options during COVID-19. Then subsequently lost $13,000 trading stock options. Story 50. Not too bad in the scheme of things, but 400 euros and my iPhone, whatever the model was 8 years ago, were stolen in Vienna, one of the safest cities in Europe. I then took many benzodiazepines to calm down and try to sleep, so I don't remember anything from the 2 days I spent in Hungary after leaving Austria the next day, except buying a new iPhone in the basement of a mall and a bartender in a ruined bar stopping me from drinking the dry ice part of an elaborate cocktail setup. Story 51. Spent $6,000 trying to fix my first car and still had issues with it. I did not even drive it for a full 2 years and sold it to a dealership. Story 52. $700. My ex-boyfriend and I went on vacation with his family, and I paid for both of us up front. He promised to pay me back his portion as soon as he could, but he resisted any time I brought it up over the next 2 years. He never paid me back a penny, but I learned an important lesson. Story 53. The total amount of debt I have given to my friends over the years is $30,000. Nobody gave it to me and I have no document. I gave $25,000 for roof repairs, but the man disappeared. I later learned that he went to jail. He scammed others too. We did not make a contract because we knew each other. Years later, he called and apologized. Still no money. When I was 20 years old, a friend wanted my $13,000 car. He drove it while drunk and hit a tree. He left too. These were lessons for me. I did not make the same mistakes again. Therefore, I am considered profitable. Story 54. Purchased a house. Paying cash for it, and the money was comfortably invested in shares. The stock market goes up and down, which has never been an issue. However, the former president implemented tariffs that wreaked havoc on the economy, causing my stocks to dissolve. I had to withdraw the funds that day. On Thursday afternoon, I had $680,000. By Tuesday morning, I had $599,000. Just like that, the house settlement was held up, and the money was still in my offset account doing something, but not enough. Story 55. I had to leave an ex recently. On top of food losses and other expenses that left me in negative numbers during the first week, I had to break a lease, pay the fine, pay for 2 moving trucks, pay a lawyer, and lose a deposit. It was almost $20,000 that I do not have, and that is in debt. Story 56. My friend went to look at a new car and took £30,000 in cash with him in case he bought it. This was 25 years ago, before easy bank transfers. He did not buy the car and, on the way back, saw me go into the pub. He went in for a quick drink and left the money on the passenger seat. He ended up staying until closing time and then remembered the money. It was gone. He is quite wealthy, so it did not ruin him, but it was tough to accept. The same person went to view a motorcycle with £10,000 in his pocket. It was a 3-hour drive. He stopped halfway to use the restroom in an industrial estate. He did not have the cash when he went to buy the motorcycle. He drove back and found the money lying on the ground where he had stopped. He has lost much more than this in failed business ventures, but his successful ventures far outweigh the losses. Story 57. Oof. My husband lost his job, where he earned $100,000. He had a mental breakdown. We lost our home and became basically homeless within 5 months of the job loss. We also lost health insurance. It took me a long time to find work because I had been a stay-at-home mother for years. Our savings stretched and lasted a while, but it was not enough. Story 58. $7,000 in shares of a cannabis company that lied to everyone and made terrible decisions. The company was then sued in the United States, but I was not eligible to join the class action lawsuit. Lesson learned. I will never use the stock market again, or I will never listen to advice from people ever again. Story 59. $40,000 in total stolen by Federal Express and United Parcel Service. I could not recover it because it was for illegal goods, commonly referred to as a trap tax. Story 60. I got into a car accident on my way home from a military drill. Since it was before I had gone to boot camp, they made me pay my own bills. My air ambulance flight, since I did not have insurance, was over $200,000, and my surgeries altogether were over $100,000. Once the final cent from my bank account was gone, I was 19 and had been saving since I was 16 when I got my first job. My Veterans Affairs representative pulled some strings, and the military paid for the rest but refused to reimburse me for what I had already paid. I was lucky, but I had to start from ground zero. Story 61. I struggled with drug addiction for nearly a decade. On cannabis alone, I spent nearly 20,000 pounds, and that was definitely not the only drug I was using. I probably spent close to 50,000 pounds trying to run away from my problems. Therapy is expensive, but it is cheaper than that. Story 62. Aside from my first marriage, in 2021, I got caught up in the special purpose acquisition company investing craze. I lost close to $7,000 in Churchill Capital calls and warrants, but I had a few winning positions in Churchill Capital, so my net loss was around $4,000. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, I bought 100 shares of the Russia ETF for $505 and immediately sold a one-year covered call at $8, pocketing a $199 option premium. I thought the war would be a short, sharp conflict ending with Russia gaining some territory and a ceasefire, after which the exchange-traded fund would resume trading in the 20s. Of course, that did not happen. Sanctions did, trading in the Russia ETF was suspended, and a liquidation was announced. To date, the fund has paid out about $70 in post-liquidation distributions with no end in sight. The position still sits in my taxable brokerage account, market value zero, trading permanently halted. I cannot sell it, although I believe the brokerage can take the shares and record the net loss on my tax form. I am retired now, both from working and from gambling in my brokerage account. Story 63. I lost $40,000 in a failed business venture. Luckily, my banker was willing to work with me, and I was able to pay it off in a few years. Story 64. Made too much money in our third year in business. Did not pay Queensland emissions trading tax we did not know existed, and received a $25,000 bill at tax time. Story 65. Not a loss in the literal sense, but I was locked out of all my bank accounts for 4 weeks once. I couldn't withdraw money or pay my bills from my accounts. Automated payments like rent, electricity, and internet stopped as well. My credit cards still worked until my bank tried to charge the credit from my bank accounts. Something that didn't work, so they also blocked my cards, despite them being the issue in the first place. Long story short, I helped my parents by sending them a larger amount of money. Since we live in different countries, I broke these transactions into smaller ones. When their financial situation improved, my dad called me and asked how to send the money back to me. I specifically told him to split payments like I did. He didn't. I was instantly flagged for money laundering and had to provide full disclosure about every transaction over the past 2 years on all of my accounts and in all countries where I am required to pay taxes. I did all that, signed the document, sent it in, and 24 hours later everything was locked, and all of my data was directly sent to this country's state tax department and, for some reason, to the Internal Revenue Service as well. To paint the picture of why the Internal Revenue Service issue especially annoys me, I've never been to the United States. I don't even have family there. They just assumed something and went with it. The reason they blocked everything? The signature I used to sign these disclosure documents did not match the signature I used 12 years ago when I opened my bank accounts after moving here. That was literally the only reason. They had seen a large transaction from another neighboring country, assumed I was laundering money, and when my signature did not match 100%, they took it as confirmation that something was wrong. At first, they didn't even really tell me why my documents were declined. After many phone calls over 4 weeks, and me starting to cry during one of these calls because my entire life felt like it was about to fall apart, the representative I was talking to finally explained the issue. So I signed all the documents again, using my signature from 12 years ago, which is not that different from now, and after sending it in again, My accounts were unlocked after 24 hours. Existing for 4 weeks without access to any money was the hardest lesson I've learned recently, especially because I was, and still am to a degree, a big fan of cashless payments. But now I make sure to always have a bit of cash at home, just in case. Story 66. Not an actual loss, but a lost opportunity. When I was about 22, I had saved up $10,000 by working construction jobs. When the 2008 stock market crash happened, I remembered what my high school economics teacher advised me to do in rare instances like that. Pick a reliable stock, buy it low, and wait for the economy to recover. My plan was to buy $10,000 worth of Apple stock. I set up an online brokerage account through my bank and was ready to transfer the funds, but I chickened out at the last minute. I worried that Apple might not survive the financial crisis and I would lose everything. At the time, Apple stock sold for about $3, sometimes even less. Now it sells for nearly $200. I wasted that $10,000 being an irresponsible young adult. I can't even tell you what I spent it on, to be honest. Had I gone through with the stock purchase, it would be worth over $600,000 now. Story 67. Lebanese bank crisis. All banks went bankrupt due to corruption and can no longer give out depositors' money. I lost 2.6 million US dollars in 2019. The amount is just there to look at, never to be seen, spent, or touched. Story 68. About $4,000 lost in the stock market. It is not life-changing, just more annoying. I am, however, on extremely bad terms with my father, so I guess any inheritance is gone. But that is another 10 years away if he lives to the expected age in our country. I hope his new wife passes away first. Then it looks better because he is a greedy person. Story 69. When I bought Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade plus Rebirth bundle on Steam during a sale, I never played either. I am just like $1,000 down. Story 70. Investing in a device that promised to change my life but just ended up as an expensive paperweight. Story 71. I was almost ready to put down a deposit and buy an apartment in 2007. I was a print media journalist earning about £24,000 per year. I could afford a place of around £100,000, which would have gotten me on the property ladder. Then the global financial crisis hit, and the industry collapsed. I was made redundant in the 4th or 5th round of layoffs. I had to spend my deposit and savings of about £10,000 just to keep myself afloat, and it all went. By the time I was in a position to buy again over a decade later, I had to save up a £35,000 deposit. The house I bought cost £338,000, and in the intervening time, I calculated that I spent about £150,000 on rent, not to mention losing maybe £50,000 in property appreciation and having to spend another £25,000 on the deposit and other costs like moving and application fees and deposit deductions. I definitely have a better house now than I would have then, but I missed out on more than a decade of property growth, paying landlords' mortgages for over a decade and more. All in all, I am probably about £250,000 worse off due to the economic collapse. Oh, and I once bought a cheap Italian motorbike. Aprilia, even if it was gorgeous. Story 72. Inaction. Not investing in index funds when I was younger due to a lack of knowledge about investing. I read about it in high school but did not take any actionable steps. I only saved money without allowing it to grow. Story 73. In 2016, after making some money with cryptocurrency, I considered myself a day trader. I invested in foreign exchange, believing the value of the British pound would increase because no one would actually vote for Brexit and Donald Trump, right? Story 74. My ex-girlfriend convinced me to invest in SafeMoon, saying it was going to be huge. This was when cryptocurrency was surging. Fortunately, I only spent $1,000 while she spent a couple of $1,000s. Story 75. Loaned a friend $2,500. She needed it to pay some court costs. After a year of promises to start repaying as soon as possible, I never heard from her again. It was a mistake on my part. Story 76. Still not sure what the actual dollar amount will be, but we bought a house in Altadena in late fall last year and did approximately $75,000 worth of necessary renovations. Then it promptly burned down in the Eaton fire. We have insurance and plan to rebuild, but I am pretty sure it will result in a sizable loss once everything is finalized. The property was unique and had many cool, usable, but unpermitted structures, meaning they were not included in the total insurance rebuild amount. Therefore, we will be losing a significant amount of value. Story 77. Around $80,000. I was scammed with an apartment. Turns out I bought a flat full of poison barely covered in paint. The seller made the contract nearly waterproof tight, so I cannot step back or sue. I am trying to sue anyway. Let us see. Story 78. 10,000 plus from my recent breakup, peanuts in the grand scheme of things, but it really sucks starting from scratch. Story 79. I lost my job and had to sell my bitcoins to stay afloat until I get hired again. It was about $5,000 worth of cryptocurrency. If I had never sold that amount of cryptocurrency, it would have gone up to $30,000. I have never forgiven my former boss for this. Story 80. Reporting a sexual assault. 5 years of police mistakes, safety relocations, and time off work. I stopped tracking at $300,000. About to lose my house. Story 81. My stocks and shares are about $4,000 in the hole because of tariffs imposed during the Trump administration. It has crippled my ability to launch my ketchup business. And no, I did not vote for him, so please keep me out of that discussion. Thank you to supporters of the former administration and non-voters. Story 82. I paid $2,000 20 years ago to a stranger in the United States to send me a predator costume. Still waiting. Any day now. Story 83. Renting a place to live for the past 10 years, or taking a $10,000 hit on my stock investments when the former president decided to damage the world economy. Story 84. Last winter, we had snow on the ground. A warm day melted it and then it refroze. The next day, it rained, creating the slipperiest conditions I have ever seen. I slid my car, a Saturn, into my coworker's BMW. I decided it might be better not to use insurance, so I paid him $2,000 out of pocket. The money was gone just like that. Story 85. My dad squandered my siblings and my inheritance from my grandparents, my mother's parents. I guess it was not a loss since I did not know about it until I was in my mid-20s. Gone were a few $1,000,000 in property and equities that my grandparents spent a lifetime accumulating. Impressive for poor children of immigrants from Eastern Europe. For us, we mostly turned out okay, but we had to deal with the trauma of seeing the family lose houses we thought were ours, our grandparents' vacation homes, eviction from multiple homes, constant unrest and uncertainty and embarrassment. These experiences made us siblings closer, but that was a lot of trauma bonding, too. The only thing I wish we had the money for is something that would have helped me avoid a lot of student loans and probably get ahead sooner. But I am a white-collar professional now, just bought my first house, married earlier this year, and by all accounts a success story. So was it a loss? Yes, but not all was lost. Story 86. I decided to learn how to trade options even though my friends said I was not smart. Somehow, I turned $3,000 into about $35,000 in 3 months. I felt confident. Then, I lost about $28,000 right before the COVID-19 pandemic in one day. Story 87. I worked 2 jobs during and a bit after high school, sometimes until 3 a.m., and made $34,000. My mother took all the money and my bank card, and I was gaslighted into feeling like I was not helping the family for 4 years. I found out that most of the money was used for her addiction to very addictive drugs prescribed by her doctor. Nearly all the past transactions were withdrawals from a gas station ATM. I wish I had been able to go to school. Story 88. I was asked to invest further into a company I had already invested some in from a friend. I declined, but another friend took the opportunity. Now they own a fairly popular website and brand. That $50,000 would have made me about 7 to 8 million. I also once declined to get paid in Bitcoin for an old phone I did not want in 2010. That would be worth about the same now. The major lesson I learned is to bet on the long shots. Story 89. Lost $140 at the casino in the Bahamas when I was about 18. I have never financially or emotionally recovered from this. Story 90. Over $80,000 in inheritance dispute. The other party lost around $160,000, and he lost and could not get costs covered. Story 91. I did not buy Bitcoin when it was $300, and my friend kept insisting. Once in a lifetime opportunity lost. I am now kicking myself. Story 92. I was very excited about a $75,000 inheritance gift in July. We made big plans to pay off debt and enjoy a vacation. The next month, I was laid off. It was not so much a loss, but what could have been something extra had to be used for basics during the 9 months I was out of work. From that perspective, it was a blessing. No regrets, though. I did what I had to do. Could have been a lot worse. Story 93. Got into the GameStop squeeze. I could have made some money but did not know when to call it a day. Do I regret it? No, it was worth being part of history. Story 94. Broke up with my unbearable ex. I extended the olive branch when I should have kept my mouth shut and put down a $5,000 deposit so she could get a new place. This allowed me to move on with my life. In summary, being nice cost me $5,000. Story 95. I was once up $16,940 in an underground casino in Korea, having the time of my life. Beautiful women and smiling faces were everywhere. It was my moment. I went all in, and now I am posting here 31 years later. Story 96. There was a woman selling candy on the street and I was on acid. Long story short, I paid $10 for a small pack of Starburst. Story 97. Modifying cars and participating in track days are great hobbies, but I have wasted a lot of money on these activities over the years. Maybe I will move on to chess or something else. Story 98. I lost my job, house, car, and everything I own. Can happen to anyone at any time in any profession. No drugs or addiction were involved. The mental strain and stress just broke me. I am slowly getting back up, but it is probably the hardest thing I have ever done. Story 99. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I spent $100,000 in 5 to 6 months. No vacations, drinks, women, or anything else. I was trying to keep my family. I can't even tell you where that money went. Story 100. Flew out to Las Vegas for 24 hours for the opening night of the Eagles at the Sphere. We decided to hit the tables before the concert and turned $400 into almost $8,000 on a wild roulette and blackjack run. After the concert, we visited several bars and eventually returned to the tables. I left a few hours later with only $600. Did not care though, had an amazing time. The concert was a 10 out of 10. Story 101. $369,000 from a freeze that destroyed my home. State Farm and the Federal Emergency Management Agency denied the claims. Thank you, State Farm. This destroyed my life. Story 102. During the dot-com bubble, I got in late and lost about $6,000. Timing is everything in this life. Story 103. I was 21 in college with no money. My parents were broke. They bought me a used car for $2,000 in 1998. I totaled it 2 months later. I then had no choice but to charge $5,000 for a used car. Took me years to pay it off, but I did. Story 104. Recession 2008, lost $250,000, but I got it back when the market recovered, so maybe it was not a loss. Story 105. I accidentally walked into a fancy restaurant downtown because I wanted to try something new and managed to get a seat after a snarky look from the hostess for not making a reservation. Then I realized the entrees here cost at minimum $200. It was the most expensive dinner I have ever had. Story 106. Got involved in a cryptocurrency project as an early user, beta tester, and code contributor, and received an airdrop of over $800,000 worth of tokens without any vesting period. Decided not to sell and kept everything out of respect or for other reasons. Today, those tokens are worth $246,000. This represents more of an opportunity loss than an actual loss. Technically, it could be seen as a $246,000 gain. Story 107. I worked a commission-only job as an independent contractor for an unethical employer. When I quit, he withheld approximately $55,000 in commission payments owed to me. It has been 3 years, and I am still pursuing legal action to recover the money. Story 108. My wife tried to start her own business. I pleaded, argued, and did everything I could to have her rethink it. A few years later, it completely failed, and guess who had to bail her out? Story 109. My dad was killed in an offshore oil rig explosion when I was 3, and my mom received a settlement. She set aside a large amount for me to use when I turned 18. Unfortunately, neither she, my stepdad, nor anyone taught me the value of money. So, I spent $130,000 in 1994 dollars. Quickly. I had many friends around until the money was gone. It affected me psychologically for a long time because I felt used, foolish, and that I had wasted a huge opportunity. Story 110. I went to the emergency room with chest pains and no insurance. Over the next 4 months, they billed me repeatedly. No matter how much I paid, there was another larger bill until I was wiped out financially. The final bill was paid at the end of February 2020. The next month, COVID-19 hit. I forget the total amount I had to pay, but it was at least $10,000, which I had spent 5 or 6 years saving from my job at McDonald's. Even though I have a much better job now, it has taken years to recover. Story 111. Bought a house and took out a $15,000 loan from my 401k to put toward the down payment. The 401k total stayed the same, but now they take twice as much as they were automatically pulling from my paycheck, so I took a pay cut to buy my house. 4 years of raises were all wiped away by the stroke of a pen. I make less than people who have been with the company for half the time and do far less work because of this. Story 112. I learned my lesson during the dot-com bubble. I thought I was a genius with Qualcomm and a few others from 1998 to 2000 and all the Y2K hoopla. In mid to late January, there was a 10% drop. I believed I was a genius and rushed in to buy the dip. By mid-March to April, I had lost $300,000. Story 113. I hired a close friend to be the vice president of sales at my company. He failed badly, and I lost $100,000 with zero return. I learned important lessons about management and not letting things get that far. He resigned in disgrace and never apologized for his poor performance. Our relationship has not been the same since. Ultimately, I take accountability. Working at my firm was the most money he had ever made in his life. He later got a job at a new company in the same role. The new company did not conduct any reference checks, and he is living a consequence-free life without having to face the failure. He is a smooth talker and is good at convincing people, even though he has never actually produced results in a serious business setting. Story 114. Bought property in Keaton Beach, Florida, for $35,000 in 1998. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new development with shopping malls and golf courses. None of that happened. Sold it in 2018 for $12,000. However, I was able to write off the loss on my taxes for 2 years, so there was some recovery. Story 115. Divorce. I had to give her half of my house sale and $40,000 from my retirement because she had over $20,000 in credit card debt that I did not know about. Still, it was worth it. Story 116. Bought a 2004 Toyota Tacoma for $8,900. I drove it for a couple of years until the frame snapped in half from rust. Sold it for $2,000. I used $1,300 of that $2,000 to buy a 1997 Chevrolet all-wheel drive Astrovan. I have been living in it for the past 8 months, so I suppose I have recouped my losses. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.